The excavator bucket bit into my 40 acres at 6:12 a.m., tearing wet grass off land I had bought less than 24 hours earlier. HOA crews were already cutting a trail across my property, dragging orange stakes toward the old service gate that controlled the only legal access road behind Willow Creek Estates. The diesel smell rolled over my porch like smoke. A printed sign stood in the mud, "Future Willow Creek Community Trail." Behind it, 3 golf carts idled with neighbors filming like this was a ribbon cutting, not trespassing. Then one worker pointed at the gate keypad and said, "Mrs. Whitmore said the owner already approved the access code." That was her first real mistake. I had changed that gate system myself before sunrise. The keypad blinked red in the fog. Nobody noticed except me. I stepped off the porch barefoot, coffee still in my hand, and the cold boards left dust on my heels. The machine kept growling. Mud slapped against its tracks. A white Lexus rolled through the cul-de-sac entrance and stopped beside the trail sign like it had been placed there for a campaign photo. Diane Whitmore stepped out in cream slacks, oversized sunglasses, and a smile polished enough to sell bad news. She was the HOA president. I knew that much. Everyone in Willow Creek knew that much. She had the kind of voice people used when they were already counting your surrender. "You must be the new buyer," she called. "We were hoping to speak before you got confused." The bucket dropped again. Dirt thudded against dirt. I looked past her, toward the tree line. 2 men were installing a second sign near my fence. Another worker was spray painting arrows on the ground. A woman in a tennis visor was walking her golden retriever across the slope like she had done it for years. Diane followed my eyes and sighed. "This greenbelt has been part of our community plan since 2019. She said greenbelt like the word erased the deed. I kept walking. The air smelled like torn roots and hot hydraulic oil. "My name is Ethan Mercer. I build access systems for industrial sites, gates, roads, utility corridors, things people only notice when they stop working. I bought those 40 acres because the land sat behind the HOA but outside its covenants. It had a gravel service road, an old pond, a locked maintenance gate, and enough quiet to hear wind move through oak leaves. That was the whole point. Quiet." Diane reached into a leather folder and pulled out a glossy map. It showed the neighborhood clubhouse, the pool, the walking paths, and my land shaded in soft green. There were dotted lines across my back hill. Benches. Trail markers. A lookout deck by the pond. My pond. "We've already announced Saturday's opening," she said. "Families are excited." The crowd behind her went quiet for half a second. That silence told me more than her map did. This was not a misunderstanding. This had a schedule. A budget. Witnesses. Maybe donors. Maybe buyers who had been promised a view they did not own. I looked at the sign again. The screws were fresh. The post was set deep. Someone had planned this long before I signed closing papers. Diane lowered her sunglasses just enough for me to see her eyes. "Technically, you own the parcel," she said. "Functionally, it serves the community." The excavator engine coughed behind her. My coffee had gone cold. I set the cup on the fence post and walked to the keypad. The worker near the gate held up a clipboard. "Sir, we need that open." I typed 4 numbers. The lock clicked, but the gate did not open. Instead, the red warning light above it began to flash. Diane's smile thinned. Across the trail, every phone camera turned toward me. That was when the county truck came around the corner. The county truck rolled to a stop 20 feet from my gate and nobody moved for a second. Even the excavator dropped into idle. The engine rattled low and uneven. Diane turned first. Her smile came back fast, practiced and smooth. She waved before the driver even opened the door. "Perfect timing," she said. "We were just resolving access." The county worker stepped out carrying a clipboard and a fluorescent vest draped over one shoulder. He looked at the trail sign. Then at the excavator. Then at the crowd. Finally he looked at me. "Who owns parcel B, 17, he asked. Nobody answered immediately. Diane stepped forward. "The community has been coordinating future recreational use." He did not write anything down. He just asked again. "Who owns it?" I raised my hand. The worker nodded once and walked past everyone toward my gate. Diane followed him so closely her heels sank into the wet dirt. The cameras came with her. I stayed where I was. The red light above the keypad kept blinking. Slow. Steady. The county guy stopped at the lock housing and read the serial tag. Then he looked at me. "You installed this?" "Yesterday evening." He nodded again. "Commercial grade." Diane laughed softly. "He is being dramatic. We only wanted temporary access while paperwork catches up." Temporary. That word landed wrong. I looked around. Fresh gravel had already been dumped near the trail entrance. There were utility flags in the grass. White paint marks. Someone had measured things. Somebody spent money. The county worker turned back toward the crowd. "Who authorized work?" Diane lifted her folder. "Community Planning Committee." He held out his hand. She handed him the glossy map instead. He flipped once. Twice. His face stayed flat. Then he folded the map and handed it back. "This is marketing material." Nobody said anything. One of the golf carts quietly backed away. Diane crossed her arms. "Look, people bought homes expecting expanded green access. There it was. Not a mistake. Not confusion. Expectations." I looked at the families standing behind her. Kids holding water bottles. Dogs pulling leashes. People dressed for a neighborhood event. They had not come to steal land. They thought they had already been sold something real. The county worker finally turned to me. "Did you authorize construction, access, signage, or public entry?" "No," he scribbled one line on the clipboard. Diane opened her mouth immediately. "We have emails." He looked up. "From the owner?" She stopped talking. Wind moved through the trees behind the pond. I could hear the chain links on my gate ticking softly. Then the county worker pointed toward the flashing keypad. "You may want to keep that closed." Diane looked at him. Then at me. Then back at the trail behind her. Her smile disappeared for the first time all morning. That was when her assistant came running over with another folder. Her assistant reached Diane carrying a thick white binder against her chest like it contained oxygen. Diane took it immediately and flipped through pages without looking at me. Paper snapped in the wind. The county worker waited. No urgency. No pressure. Just silence. Diane finally stopped on one page and held it out. "Here," she said. "Authorization trail." He took the sheet. I watched his eyes move once down the page. Then again slower. He turned the paper sideways. "This is not signed." Diane did not blink. The previous understanding was documented. Previous understanding. Another careful phrase. The county worker handed the paper back. "By whom?" Diane opened her mouth and closed it again. Her assistant stepped in. Younger. Nervous. Clipboard tucked under one arm. The developer team communicated that this section would become shared space after transition. That got my attention. Not because of what she said. Because she said developer. I looked beyond the trail. Beyond the clubhouse roofs. There were 4 houses at the back edge of Willow Creek with oversized decks facing my property. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Premium lots. The kind people paid extra for. Suddenly the benches on Diane's map made more sense. The pond made more sense. This was not about walking trails. This was about selling a view. The county worker asked one question. Who approved transition? Nobody answered. Wind moved the sign again. Future community trail. Fresh vinyl. Professionally printed. A guy in a polo near the golf carts quietly folded his drone and packed it away. Diane straightened her shoulders. Look. This does not need to become difficult. That sentence always means somebody already made decisions without permission. She turned to me with the smile back in place. Ethan, I am sure we can compensate you for inconvenience. Compensate. Like I had arrived late to a reservation. I looked past her at my gate. The warning light still blinked. Slow and steady. Then I noticed something else. Tire tracks. Not from today. Older impressions beneath the mud. Multiple passes. Heavy equipment. Somebody had been entering before. Sunrise. Maybe for days. I walked over and crouched near the gravel edge. Fresh scrape marks near the lock housing. Somebody had tried opening it without the code. I stood up and looked at Diane. She saw me notice. Her expression changed for half a second. Tiny. Almost invisible. But enough. The assistant shifted her weight and dropped the binder slightly. Several pages slipped out and scattered across the wet grass. Nobody moved at first. Then one sheet flipped over in the wind and landed face up near my boots. Full color rendering. My pond. Wooden overlook. Families. Title across the top, Willow Creek Nature Expansion Phase 1. Scheduled opening date. Saturday. 3 days from now. The county worker slowly looked up. Diane reached for the paper too late. Then someone from the crowd asked the question nobody was supposed to ask. The question came from a man in a navy quarter-zip standing near the second golf cart. He pointed at the rendering in my hand. Wait. If Saturday is opening day, why are we hearing about ownership now? Nobody answered immediately. That silence hit harder than the excavator noise. People started looking at each other instead of at me. Diane recovered fast. She stepped toward the crowd with both palms open. Everyone relax. This is an administrative delay. Administrative delay. Like benches appeared by accident. Her assistant was already kneeling in the mud collecting pages. I looked down and caught another sheet before it blew away. Lot Premium Conversion Summary. 4 highlighted addresses. Backlit Enhancement Package. Estimated value increase per property. My land sat behind all 4. I folded the paper once and put it under my arm. Diane noticed. Her jaw tightened for half a second. Then she smiled again. Ethan, perhaps we should discuss this privately. I stayed where I was. Why privately? A few heads turned. Someone lowered their phone. The county worker took 2 steps toward the excavator and asked the operator for permits. The guy climbed down and handed over a clipboard immediately. He looked uncomfortable now. Less confident than before. The county worker flipped pages. Work order. Equipment rental. Site prep schedule. Then he stopped. Who signed access authorization? The operator pointed without hesitation. Diane did not speak. Her assistant did. Community Development Office. The county worker asked another question. Is that an actual office? No answer. The excavator engine shut off completely. The quiet felt strange after all that noise. You could hear birds again. Somebody coughed near the trail entrance. A woman with a stroller stepped closer to me. "We paid extra for green access," she said quietly. "The realtor said this area was protected forever." Protected. Interesting word. I looked at the rendering again. Same pond. Same overlook. Same trail. Everything carefully framed to make the houses feel bigger than they were. Diane turned back to me and lowered her voice. "Do not make this harder than necessary." Her perfume mixed with diesel and wet soil. "You own acreage. We maintain community value. We can work something out." I looked at the trail markers. Fresh paint. Fresh cuts. Somebody had spent weeks preparing for this moment. This was not negotiation. This was rollout. I asked her one question. "How many homes did you sell using this view?" Her eyes flicked away too fast. Not to the crowd. Not to the county worker. Toward the back row of houses. That was answer enough. Then her assistant stood up holding the last stack of papers and accidentally dropped a folded site packet at the county worker's feet. He opened it. His expression changed for the first time all morning. He looked at Diane. Then at me. Then he asked if I had seen the drainage plan. The county worker held the drainage plan with both hands and stared at it longer than anything else he had looked at all morning. The paper fluttered once in the wind. He flattened it against the clipboard and asked me, "Have you reviewed any of this?" I shook my head. He turned the sheet around and held it out. Blue lines crossed my property. Not trails. Not benches. Water routes. Retention paths. Overflow channels. One thick line cut directly through the low section near my pond and continued behind the premium lots. My eyes followed it all the way to a shaded rectangle labeled Community Recreation Zone. The rectangle sat exactly where my maintenance gate connected to the gravel road. Diane stepped closer immediately. "That version is preliminary." The county worker did not look at her. "This has stamped revisions." Her assistant stopped moving entirely. One page still hung halfway out of the binder in her arms. The county worker traced a finger along the corner. "Submitted 6 months ago." 6 months. I closed my eyes for half a second and pictured the closing table yesterday. Fresh signatures. Fresh keys. Fresh lock code. Meanwhile, somebody had apparently been drawing roads and water channels across my land before I even owned it. The county worker asked another question. "Did the seller disclose any active development discussions?" "No," he nodded once and wrote something down. Diane finally changed tactics. Her voice softened. "Ethan, these plans were never final. Communities explore possibilities all the time." Explore. Interesting word for excavators and survey stakes. I looked back at the trail entrance. Workers had stopped pretending to work. Nobody touched the machines anymore. Phones were out now. Quiet conversations. The atmosphere shifted. Not celebration. Waiting. One of the homeowners stepped forward. Middle-aged. Polo shirt. Expensive sunglasses. He pointed at the plan. "Hold on. Our sales package showed this area as permanent open access." Diane turned fast. "That is not relevant right now." Wrong answer. More people started talking. Another homeowner said she paid a lot premium for pond visibility. Someone else mentioned walking trail maintenance fees. I said nothing. I just looked at the drawing again. The blue drainage line bothered me. Not because of the water. Because of the route. I know access systems. You do not route utilities, maintenance, and overflow through private land unless somebody expects control. Then I noticed the title block. Project Phase 1. That wording sat wrong. Phase 1 means more than one phase. I looked up. What is Phase 2? Diane answered too quickly. There is no Phase 2. Her assistant looked at her. Tiny movement. Too late. The county worker caught it too. He calmly held out his hand. I will take the full packet. Diane hesitated. Her assistant hesitated longer. Then she handed it over. The county worker flipped deeper into the stack. His thumb stopped. He pulled out a folded site rendering larger than the others and opened it across the hood of his truck. Everybody around us leaned closer. Then I saw my house on the map. My house was not labeled as a house. It was labeled Visitor Services. I stared at the rendering spread across the county truck hood while the paper snapped in the wind. Same roof. Same porch. Same gravel road. But around it were parking spaces, shaded picnic tables, restrooms, and a neat little icon that said Information Center. My pond had a boardwalk. My gate had become Trail Entrance West. Nobody spoke for 3 full seconds. Then somebody behind me laughed once and stopped immediately. Diane reached for the rendering. The county worker folded one corner under his hand and did not let go. You submitted this? He asked. Diane looked at the crowd before answering. Not him. The crowd. This was concept development only. The county worker pointed to another box. Estimated completion timeline, 18 months. Budget allocation attached. She did not answer. Her assistant looked like she wanted to disappear into the binder. I leaned closer and saw something else in the lower corner. Existing structure repurposing cost savings. My house. My garage. Somebody had run numbers on converting my place before I even unpacked my truck. The air felt different now. Less diesel. More wet dirt and silence. One of the homeowners stepped beside me. Same guy from earlier. He looked at the rendering and said quietly, "That is your actual house." I nodded. He stepped back immediately. Like ownership suddenly became contagious. Diane tried again. People are overreacting. Another homeowner spoke up. Older woman. Running shoes. Our board meeting never showed this. Diane smiled at her. Too fast. Planning documents evolve. Wrong answer again. More voices started. Short questions. Overlapping. Not angry yet. Just confused. The county worker kept turning pages. One after another. Site access. Utility corridor. Parking counts. Then he stopped again. Why is there a controlled access note? He looked at me. You said you installed the gate yesterday? Yes. He tapped the plan. Interesting. I stepped closer. A note beside the entrance read, existing electronic access infrastructure retained to reduce development cost. I actually laughed once. Quiet. Short. They were not planning to replace my gate. They were planning to keep it. Somebody expected access. Permanent access. Through a system I controlled. Diane noticed me reading and took one step forward. That feature was under review. I looked at her. You mean my feature? She opened her mouth but did not answer. The county worker finally closed the packet and tucked it under his arm. Then he asked me if I had completed occupancy yet. Strange question. I told him no. Closing was yesterday. Truck was still half unpacked. He nodded slowly and looked back at the plans. That timing matters. Diane turned immediately. Why would that matter? The county worker looked at her for the first time in several minutes. Because somebody filed this before ownership transferred. Her assistant dropped the binder again. The binder hit the mud with a soft slap and papers spread across the gravel like oversized leaves. Nobody rushed to pick them up this time. Diane stood completely still. Her assistant stared at the ground. The county worker crouched and gathered only 3 pages. He chose carefully. That caught my attention more than anything else. He stood up and flipped to one page marked development sequence. His eyes narrowed. Then he asked Diane a question that sounded simple. Did you notify the purchaser? Purchaser. Not owner. Not resident. Diane answered immediately. That responsibility belongs to the seller. He did not react. He just turned the page around and showed it to her. I could not see the details. I only saw one sentence highlighted in yellow. Her face changed before she spoke. Tiny shift. Too quick for most people to catch. I work with access systems. I spend my life watching people react before equipment fails. She had expected confusion. She did not expect timing questions. Diane recovered and crossed her arms. This is being blown out of proportion. Nobody answered. The homeowners had gone quiet again. Different quiet this time. Less trust. More calculation. The man in the quarter zip took out his phone and opened something. Another neighbor did the same. Probably sales packets. Probably promises. I walked over to my gate and rested my hand on the cold metal post. The warning light still blinked above the keypad. Slow. Red. Familiar. That gate had been the first thing I touched after closing. New batteries. New access table. New logs. I installed systems because details matter. Every entry matters. Every failed attempt matters. Suddenly I remembered something. Around 5:30 that morning, before the excavator started, my phone had shown 3 failed access alerts. I ignored them because I thought delivery drivers had turned around. I pulled out my phone and opened the app. Time stamps. 5:27. 5:29. 5:31. Same user label. Temporary maintenance access. I frowned. I never created that profile. My thumb opened the history screen. One successful access appeared 6 days ago. 6 days before closing. My stomach did not drop. It tightened. Somebody had programmed access into infrastructure they did not own. I looked at the gate housing again. Clean screws. No pry marks. Somebody had not forced entry. Somebody expected permission. The county worker noticed my screen. What are you looking at? I handed him the phone. He read silently. Diane saw his expression and stepped forward immediately. That proves nothing. He handed the phone back to me. Actually, it proves somebody was using infrastructure before transfer. Nobody spoke. Wind moved through the trees near the pond. Then the quarter zip guy lowered his phone and said quietly, almost to himself, my purchase brochure mentioned a private entrance. Diane turned too fast. That was when I opened the access profile details. I opened the profile details and the screen refreshed for half a second before the entry expanded. Access Group, HOA Maintenance Temporary. Creation date, 6 days earlier. Assigned by, External Administrator. My thumb stayed still. The air felt colder even though the sun had climbed higher. The county worker stepped beside me. Can you open the log? I handed him the phone. He scrolled once. Twice. Then stopped. Entry history. 3 successful openings before today. Early morning windows. Short durations. Same access group every time. Diane folded her arms tighter. That could be leftover programming. The county worker looked up. From equipment installed yesterday? She did not answer. One of the homeowners took 2 steps closer. Wait. There was already gate access. Another voice came from behind him. Who had it? Nobody looked at me anymore. Everyone looked at Diane. Her assistant quietly stepped backward and almost bumped into the excavator track. Diane finally spoke. Calm voice. Careful tone. Temporary credentials are common during transition periods. Transition again. She kept using words that sounded normal until you looked at the details. I took my phone back and opened deeper settings. User permissions. Access windows. Notes. There was one line attached to the profile. Preserve existing route for continuity. I stared at it. Preserve. Existing. Route. Somebody had already decided the road through my gate belonged in their plan. Then I opened the assigned contacts. One phone number. No name. Just a local area code. I tapped it. The crowd stayed quiet. 1 ring. 2 rings. 3. Then a phone started vibrating. Not in the crowd. Not near the workers. Diane's assistant froze. Her eyes widened before she reached into her blazer pocket and silenced it. Nobody moved. The only sound was the tiny vibration stopping. She looked at Diane immediately. Not me. Diane stepped in front of her. That proves nothing. Nobody responded. The county worker held out his hand. May I see the device? Diane smiled again. Smaller now. I do not think that is necessary. The quarter-zip homeowner laughed once without smiling. Actually, I think it is. More voices joined. Short questions. Not angry. Worse. Curious. Curiosity spreads fast when people realize they might have bought a story instead of a feature. The assistant swallowed and held the phone tighter. I looked at her and asked one question. Who asked you to test my gate? Diane answered before she could. Enough. First sharp word all morning. She took off her sunglasses. Looked at me directly. You are making assumptions. I looked at the access history again. 6 days ago. Before closing. Before I had keys. Before my house became mine. Somebody had already been using the road. Then the county worker looked at the gate, looked at the plans under his arm, and asked if the maintenance road connected anywhere else. The county worker looked from the gate to the plans and repeated the question. Does this maintenance road connect anywhere else? Nobody answered. I did. Yeah. Every head turned. I pointed past the pond toward the tree line. The gravel road loops behind the ridge and exits near county service access. The county worker looked back at the map immediately. His finger followed the blue line. Then he stopped. His expression flattened again. He asked me one more question. Can delivery trucks use that route? I nodded. Construction trucks. Utility vehicles. Equipment trailers. That is why I bought this parcel. Diane looked at me for the first time like she had forgotten something important. I kept talking. It is the only rear access without touching residential streets. Nobody said anything for a second. Then the quarter-zip homeowner slowly turned toward Diane. You told us vehicle traffic would never increase. Another voice joined. You said the nature area would be pedestrian only. Diane did not answer either of them. The county worker unfolded the large rendering one more time and laid it flat against the truck hood. He pointed to the shaded parking zone beside my house. Then he traced the access road all the way to the county exit. This is not recreational flow. He tapped the page once. This is service routing. The assistant looked down immediately. Somebody in the crowd quietly said, "Wait," another homeowner stepped closer. Are you saying they plan to run operations back here? Nobody replied. They did not need to. The drawing suddenly looked different. The benches looked smaller. The parking looked bigger. The trail looked wider. I looked again at the labels. Utility staging. Overflow parking. Maintenance storage. Tiny text I had ignored before. Diane finally spoke. Calm voice again. Concepts change. Nobody reacted. The county worker closed the packet. Not after submission. The air shifted again. Not louder. Quieter. That kind of quiet where people start connecting promises to paperwork. I looked at the trail sign in the mud. Future community trail. Clean edges. Fresh screws. I looked at the excavator. Rental decals still attached. I looked at my gate. Red warning light blinking exactly the same as before. Suddenly I understood something. They never needed my whole land. They needed the road. The gate. The controlled access. The rest was scenery. Diane followed my eyes and realized I understood. She smiled again. Smaller than before. Ethan, she said softly, this does not have to become public. That sentence told me more than everything else combined. The county worker tucked the plans under his arm and looked at me. Do not change anything yet. Then he looked at Diane. And nobody enters this property again until we review the original filings. The wind pushed the trail sign over. Nobody picked it up. Then my phone vibrated with a new access request.